Alright, hey guys, and welcome to my top 10 games of 2010 video. And yes, before you say anything, this is a top 10 of 2010 in April, the end of April of 2011. So, sorry for the long delay, but what can I say, it's better late than never. And to be honest with you guys, I was trying to play a lot of the games and catch up with a lot of the games that came out in 2010 that I still had yet to play through, and games that I wanted to play and try and finish off to kind of judge them for my top 10. Now, just a little bit of an introduction to this video. I just want to warn you guys that a lot of high-profile games that came out in 2010 I either did not play whatsoever, or I felt I did not play enough of to judge them fairly for this video. When it comes to games, if you guys watch my channel, you know I tend to stick to the more, I guess you can say lesser known, more of the lesser known titles that not a lot of people, they kind of slip under the radar. So the high profile games, while I do play some of them I just completely skip over. They're just not for me, or I'm just tired of them in general. So just wanted to say that and let you guys know, what to expect for my top 10. And I have to say that this was the absolute hardest top 10 list I've ever had to make. The final 4 games in the top 10, it took me a while to decide which one I wanted to put at number 1, because going through my head, each one of them at one point I had at the number 1 spot. So I think you guys will be interested to see what my number 1 pick is. So let's get started here. I don't want to go on too much. Coming in at number 10 is Enslaved Odyssey to the West. I did my review for this, and if you haven't checked that out, be sure to check it out. I'll go a lot more in depth. But I found this to be a very, very good action-adventure game that, in terms of gameplay, it was pretty basic. There wasn't much to the gameplay itself, but what really held it together was excellent story, excellent character development, excellent voice acting, environments and graphics that were just really beautiful. I really, really enjoyed it, so I'd highly recommend this to anybody that's a fan of action-adventure games. Okay, coming in at number 9 is a game that I have to try and convince you all to just believe me and give it a try, please. And that is Sonic Colors on the Wii. I know that a lot of you have just dismissed the Sonic series recently as being just for kids, or Sonic Team has just lost its steam and Sega's lost its steam for creating Sonic games. Please, do whatever you have to do to play Sonic Colors and give it one more try. This is without a doubt the best Sonic game I've played since Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast. Everything that Sonic was about, they did right in this. It has the speed, it has the platforming, and honestly, Sonic has not always been about speed, speed, speed. He's always been about also some nice, precise platforming, and this game is full of it. An amazing soundtrack, graphics that will just blow your mind for the Wii, level designs that are just out of this world. They're very colorful. It's just all brought together really, really well. And I just want to say this, the final boss fight in this is one of the most memorable boss fights I've had in a very long time, and may just be my favorite boss fight in a Sonic game ever. So definitely check out Sonic Colors. Castlevania Lords of Shadow. I have the Xbox 360 version. This was a game that really took me by surprise. At first I was like, oh man, this is nothing like Castlevania. And that's exactly what it is. This is nothing like an old school Castlevania game. This is a adventure game that is very similar in style to God of War, which I've always said is not a bad thing. If you're going to rip off an action-adventure game, the God of War series is definitely the right one to rip off, because it does a lot of things really well. So if you can think God of War, but place it in a medieval horror Castlevania-style setting, you basically know what this is going to be about. What really took me by surprise is just how varied and interesting the game world was. The first 8 or so hours, you're outside in lush forests with rainbows and waterfalls, and maybe slight spoilers here, but you don't actually enter the castle of Castlevania until like halfway through the game. So it was a very interesting way that they took to this game, and the reinvention of the series, which by the ending of this game, no spoilers here, but oh my god, it's very polarizing between Castlevania fans where they're taking this reboot of the series. But back to the gameplay of this. Control-wise, gameplay-wise, it all works really well. Platforming in this, how could I forget? The absolute worst part of this is the platforming. At times it's very aggravating in terms of, not knowing where you have to jump and falling down all the time. But otherwise, this is a beautiful game, one of the best looking games of 2010, and I'd highly recommend it. And the soundtrack is phenomenal. Just remember, go into it not expecting old school Castlevania. Go into it expecting a new, fresh action-adventure game. Okay, so coming in at number 7 is Starcraft II, Wings of Liberty for the PC. Now this might surprise some of you, seeing a PC game in my top 10, but now that I'm actually able to play the PC games that I want to play with a PC that can handle it, I'm really happy that I was able to play Starcraft 2, because I actually used to be an avid Starcraft 1 player many, many years ago when I got into playing that on Battle.net. I was not a pro player. I played it, even though I played it for many hours a day at times, I was still a very casual player, because in order to compete in Starcraft, you have to be insane at playing this game, or you have to be Korean. But Starcraft 2, this is the only game, well, no, there's one other game in my list that throughout the whole year since I've owned it, I've gone back and played it gradually over time. So, you know, I was playing this game almost every day, and then I'd play it maybe 2 or 3 times a week, once a week, a couple of times a month. So it's one of those games where I can revisit it and keep on going back to it and have it not get stale. What's so great about StarCraft 2 is it's StarCraft 1 with a better graphic engine, new units, a campaign mode that's actually a lot better than it used to be in StarCraft 1. I wasn't a fan of the campaign mode in StarCraft 1, but I did mostly play this online. I was a big fan of 3 vs 3. Once again, I'm very casual in terms of playing this. I'm not one of those guys that sits there for hours a day practicing team setups and macros and all that stuff. Just not really in me. But it is a ton of fun. Trust me, if you have not played StarCraft before, give it a shot. If you're going online and you're intimidated, give it a shot. They have a great ladder system that'll pair you with new players, and you have to work your way up. And if you're still a bad player after playing it for a couple of months, you'll still be paired with bad players. So it's just a heck of a lot of fun to play online. What can I say? That's why it's in my top 10. Okay, and coming in at number 6 is the other game I was telling you guys about that came out earlier in the year, and I've gone back to revisit it throughout the year, and that is Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. Now, before you're all like, oh, he just has it in his top 10 because Sonic is in the game, that might be a very, very small reason to help with my liking of this game, because it is very reliant on you enjoying Sega franchises such as Sonic the Hedgehog and House of the Dead and Super Monkey Ball and Jet Set Radio, all that kind of stuff. But what really makes this so great is it is the best, and I'm totally gonna say this, it's the best kart racer since the original Mario Kart 64, in my opinion. In terms of the gameplay, most kart racers, you know, they're very ambitious, but they just don't get the feeling of driving those cars just quite right. This is the next best thing, the best thing in terms of gameplay and controls since Mario Kart. It feels really great. All the racing cars and characters in the game all have their own unique feel. I personally am an Amigo player. That's my favorite racer in the game. But in terms of tracks and everything, this has some also the best tracks I've seen in a kart racer since Mario Kart. Some of the tracks are better than anything Mario Kart racers have ever done. The Samba de Amigo levels, once again, have some great course designs. The Super Monkey Ball levels are excellent. If you're a Sega fanboy, you definitely got to give this a try. There's still quite an active community behind this. The single player, forget about it. You got to play this online. And people still do play it online. It's not as active as it used to be, but if you go online, you know, as long as it's not like 3 o'clock midnight, you know, in the United States, you're going to find a group of players that are playing it. What can I say? It's like fan service to Sega fans. Unfortunately, it's not really well supported. They don't release any DLC for it, really. Sega really missed a great opportunity to keep a kart racer alive by releasing new tracks, new characters, which they have done, but only like once or twice. But still, check this out. You can probably find it really cheap now. Alright, coming in at number 5 is a Nintendo DS game, and that is Etrian Odyssey 3: The Drowned City. Now, when I first got this game, I was hooked. I was playing this for like 7-8 hours a day. There is no in-game timer, so I can't tell you exactly how many hours I've put into this, but let me just say a lot. For those that aren't familiar with the Etrian Odyssey series, I do speak quite highly of it. It is a very old-school dungeon crawler where 90 to 95% of the game you're going to be in a dungeon, in first-person view, getting into random battles, and leveling up your characters, advancing their skills. And that's what makes this series so great, is that you feel that sense of progression. It's hardcore enough and challenging enough to keep you on your toes in the dungeons. You know, the first 2 in the series were quite well known for being a little bit intimidating, but let me just say that Etrian Odyssey 3 is the best one in the series to go with. Forget 1 and 2, play 3 first. It's very accessible, it's a lot easier to get into. There's a class-based system now that's updated where you can pair 2 classes together. So in terms of classes, you know, there's paladins and there's healers and there's farmers, so you can gather minerals, and there's buccaneers, which are like a pirate class. There's mages. There's all kinds of different classes in Etrian Odyssey 3. And then you can piece together your team of 5, which is what I love doing the most. I put together my team, I go into the dungeon, I gain levels, and I put the skill points and skill them up the way that I see them fit. But if you're just looking for a solid dungeon crawler that's challenging, awesome, amazing music, one of my favorite soundtracks for RPGs and games ever. And if you're a fan of just character progression and leveling up and grinding levels, and you're not looking for a big, engrossing story and going through towns, everything is all menu-based. Even in the dungeons, you're just going first person, and the bottom screen has the map, and it's a grid, and trust me, some of the maps later on get pretty challenging. If you have not tried out this series before, definitely give it a try. If you're a fan of Etrian Odyssey 1, 2, Darkspire, old school dungeon crawlers like Wizardry, and you haven't played this, play it, please. Alright, coming in at number 4, and this is where it starts to get into the games where each one of these I have contemplated on possibly having it as my number 1 choice at one point in time. So, coming in at number 4 is Super Mario Galaxy 2 for the Wii, which is a phenomenal platformer, guys. You guys know I absolutely love the first Mario Galaxy. This one does everything the first one did right, if not better. The addition of Yoshi is one of the best elements of the game. The levels with Yoshi are just really great. All the new power-ups, especially the Cloud Suit, are some of my favorite. Cloud Suit may just be one of my most favorite power-ups in the Mario series ever. I really enjoy it. The levels are just so creative. I really didn't think that they can one-up what they did in Super Mario Galaxy 1, but they did. They're so creative, so awesome, so well designed, and it's just a blast to play. Now, I did a review on this game, so you can get more of my opinion by checking out my review. Trust me, if you're a fan of platformers, it is just one of the most well-balanced, perfect platformers out there on any system. I just want to say, though, I do still prefer the classic style of, say, Super Mario 64 in terms of 3D Mario games. That is still, I think, the pinnacle for me of 3D Mario games. Okay, coming in at number 3 is a game that came out very, very, very early in the year that I'm sure a lot of you have forgotten about, but I don't want you to forget about it because it's freaking awesome. And that is Bayonetta. And I just want to say, if you're going to get Bayonetta and you have a 360 and PS3, get the 360 version. It is a lot better. PS3 version suffers from frame rate issues and slowdown. So anyway, Bayonetta is an over-the-top, insanely over-the-top action-adventure game that if you're a fan of games like Devil May Cry, or just any fast-paced action games in general, you definitely have to check out Bayonetta. This is the craziest game, I think, well, yeah, I'd say, yeah, probably the most over-the-top and crazy game I've ever played. The action in this, the first hour, you think that they just throw everything at you in terms of the boss battles and everything, but as the game goes on, you're fighting bosses, and you come to find out that they're not bosses, they're actually just new enemies they're introducing for you to fight throughout the duration of the rest of the game. It is so insane. And by the end of the game, I was just so wowed at what went on that I was like, that was one of the coolest experiences I've ever had in a game ever. So it's third person, you play as Bayonetta, the girl on the cover here, she's one of the coolest characters I've seen in a game in recent memory. Her weapon is her hair, which actually makes up her clothes. So her hair is long, it covers her body, it acts as her clothes, it also acts as her weapon. Her hair can turn into giant demons that crunch and eat her enemies, giant feet and fists that stomp and punch the enemies. She has guns on her feet. She has 2 guns in her hand, so she has guns on the soles of her feet. You can go into bullet time mode and slow down stuff and shoot enemies that way. You get some crazy combos. There's different weapons that you can choose from. A story that makes absolutely no sense, but it's good in a way that it's so wacky that you just can't believe what's happening on screen. Bayonetta, guys, please. Once again, if you're a fan of this type of genre, check this out. By all means, I highly, highly recommend it. Okay, coming in at number 2 is a game that blew me away with its production values in terms of story, characters, music, the way that the gameplay was woven into the game. Just the sense of feeling like you're engrossed in a game that, doesn't really often happen in games these days, where you don't feel like you have that control over the characters and the decisions they make. And I'm sure you've all kind of figured out what game I'm talking about, and that is Heavy Rain for the PlayStation 3. Heavy Rain just absolutely blew me away last year. Without giving any of the story spoilers away, Basically, someone's kid gets kidnapped, and they're calling him the Origami Killer. So his killings are linked to origami figures, and he leaves clues behind like that. And you play as 4 different characters, and you try and piece the puzzle together, solve the mystery. You make decisions throughout the game that are actually going to impact what happens throughout the rest of your adventure. So if one of your main characters dies, which can happen, that'll impact the ending of the game and what goes on throughout. The decisions that you make, do you save this person, do you let them die? That'll impact what happens later on. So it's a very... I hadn't played anything like it before. It's like an interactive story that is similar to Indigo Prophecy, but it gives you so much more choices and decision making that's very impactful on what happens. And by the end of the game, I was like, holy crap, that was an experience. Because my experience was different from probably almost everybody else's that played through it, because the decisions that I was making was changing the way the game was unfolding. And in terms of graphics, unbelievable. It's cutting edge, for last year. I know LA Noire is coming out. That's probably gonna look a bit better in terms of facial recognition than Heavy Rain, but Heavy Rain is one gorgeous looking game. It's accompanied and paired very well with a very atmospheric soundtrack. Some people might argue with this, but the voice acting in Heavy Rain I found to be absolutely phenomenal. Gameplay wise, what's great about Heavy Rain is you do have direct control over your characters, but a lot of the actions in the game are actually QuickTime sequences, which you might be like, QuickTime sequences? That's kind of dead and gone, isn't it? But in Heavy Rain, they somehow really grip you, so you gotta, shake your controller around certain ways, you gotta do different motions with the joystick, and you might watch a video of Heavy Rain and be like, that looks boring as heck, it looks like I'm just watching a video and every once in a while flipping the joystick. But it is really engrossing, I have to tell you. When you get into like a fight sequence in this game, and your character's life is on the line, trust me, you'll fall in love with Heavy Rain. If you enjoy very well, story-driven games with some great character development, definitely, without a doubt, check out Heavy Rain. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Alright, so coming in at number 1 for my favorite game of 2010 is one that everybody loved. I mean, how could you not expect this game to be at number 1? I mean, it has everything that makes a great game. You got a world to explore, plenty of quests to go on, and horses that you summon. It is Final Fantasy XIII. Guys, I had to make a really tough decision here. In terms of putting this game at number 1, I honestly never thought that this would be my number 1 game, when I was first thinking of my top 10. But I gave it some thought, and out of all the games that I played last year, 13 really struck it struck something with me that really got me deeply involved with it. 13 to me, yes, it's not for everybody by any means. It's a very linear RPG. But what I loved about 13 was the story. I absolutely fell in love with the story, and I love the characters. This game had some really great cutscenes. It's, for the most part, the entire game is made up of linear paths, yes, that you travel down, and constant cutscenes, but I found it really enjoyable. Finding out what happens next, and every time that something new happened and a new character was introduced, I was always going back into the story log and reading up on it, so I can kind of keep myself refreshed. The first half of the game is, yes, very linear. You're constantly going down straight paths. There's no exploring. There's no towns. You do all your shopping through save points. Yes, those are some elements that probably could have been done better, but it still really kept my interest. I found the combat system to be unbelievably fun. It was very inventive. I absolutely loved the Paragrim, or the Paragrim, however you pronounce it, the new combat system that has you control 3 characters at once, but you can switch between their roles. So you can go from having a medic and a tank and a damage dealer in your team to switching it over right away in the middle of combat to 2 magic casters and a tank, or a buffer, a debuffer, and a healer. I just love the flow of combat. It's a lot of fun. In terms of its graphics, once again, they blew me away, and if you have the choice, get the PS3 version. It's on 1 disc instead of 3 or whatever it is on the 360. The music isn't compressed and the graphics are actually a little bit better. If you can go into 13 expecting some new, fresh ideas and kind of leave everything that you thought was a Final Fantasy game in the past, I think you might actually be really impressed with this. You do have to give it a shot though, because halfway through the game is when it kind of opens up, and you can start to free roam and go on side quests and such, and kind of piece your team together. So it's a little restrictive in the first half of the game, but in the second half, It's a ton of fun. Guys, I can't really recommend 13 enough to RPG fans if you haven't given it a try. If you've tried it and you've hated it, hey, hey, that's your opinion. But if you haven't tried 13 because of stuff you've heard, or you're a huge Final Fantasy fan and you're just disgusted with what they've done with it, and you refuse to try it out, please do me a favor and just give it a shot. But one good thing about 13 is, even if you hate the story and the characters, if you fall in love with the combat, chances are you'll probably have a lot of fun playing the game. Even if you're not too big of a fan of the combat, maybe the story and the characters will really keep you, entertained and playing till the end to find what happens. So 13, a bit of a polarizing game. I'm sure it'll disappoint a lot of you that it's, my number one game, but I really enjoyed it, guys. And thanks so much for watching. Sorry about the delay here, and I do want to make a video that goes over some of my other favorite games that didn't quite make it into my top 10 that I still want to let you guys know about. So, thanks for watching.